Hey folks, Aaron here from Phantom Languages, and today what I wanted to talk about is what language are you going to start studying next? It's a question that's been on my mind a bit. Not that I am going to start learning a new language anytime soon, but it's always good to think forward and start preparing these things so that you have something in mind when the time does come. If I should mention, if the day ever does come when you decide you do want to start learning a new language. Some of us don't want to or just won't ever be at that point, and that's fine. It's entirely reasonable. Say you're learning Spanish right now because you live in the United States and Spanish is the most commonly spoken second language. It's entirely reasonable to go your whole life and never learn any other language other than Spanish and then, presumably English. Many people go their whole life without ever learning any language other than their native language, and that's fine too. I have no judgments for those people. But many of us do want to acquire new languages. We are what you might call language fanatics. And we have interests in traveling, different cultures. There are many reasons to learn a new language. And sometimes it's just fun. I have certainly spent time learning languages for no reason other than the fact that I enjoyed it. So if that's you, no judgment there either. But so when the time does come to start learning your new language, what's it going to be? Why are you going to choose that one? And how are you going to go about learning? So I've had to face this multiple times in my life. The first language that I really started learning was Spanish, and studied Spanish. Most of you know this if you've been following my channel for a while. Studied Spanish for years and years and years. Could barely string together a coherent sentence in Spanish until I moved to El Salvador. I started studying what are the best methods for going about learning a new language. And then I realized that I had been doing it all wrong for so long. And that's really when I started getting interested in learning languages. And not just Spanish, because Spanish has a lot of utility in the United States, but just a passion for languages, an interest in languages, honestly, just for their own sake. And that is the summer that I started learning Esperanto. And I know I get a lot of judgment for that. People are highly critical of Esperanto if you don't understand it. But I make no apologies. Esperanto is still my favorite language. It's super fun to learn. If you've never tried it, you don't know what you're missing out on. And so I started learning Esperanto at the same time as I was learning Spanish. Okay. There's a huge contrast there in utility, right? Spanish is the second most widely spoken language in the world as far as native speakers go, only after Mandarin Chinese. Esperanto doesn't have any national level recognition in any country. But man, is it fun. And I started learning Esperanto because I watched a video that said, if you learn one language, that will help catapult you into learning more languages. Okay? For every language you learn, your next language will be easier to learn. And that made a lot of sense. And the argument was that since Esperanto is such an easy language to learn, if you make that the first language that you learn, you're going to be miles ahead of someone who struggles for years trying to learn Spanish or French. Right? So that was really the first time I ran into this conundrum. What language am I going to learn? and man, I don't regret it at all. Now looking forward, well, I've now learned Spanish, Esperanto, French, Thai. Not saying I'm done learning those languages, but I have learned each of those to at least, I'd say, an intermediate level. Salut, Rochelle. Thanks for joining. Can't stay long, but just wanted to say hi. Thanks for saying hi. Hello to Brenda as well. Thanks for jumping in. Brendan, I'm sorry. Brendan says, I really need to go from lightly conversational in Spanish to highly conversational. My parents now live in Spain, so knowing it better would be really good. I think I need to really consume content. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of different strategies. There's the speak from day one strategy, right? There's the consume nothing but comprehensible input strategy. And jump into watching more shows. Yep. And Japanese. Yeah, and a lot of us have goals of learning many languages, right? That was, I had that idea from early on, okay? So I started working really hard to master Spanish because I lived in El Salvador, and hey, it was, I had good reason to do that. But I pretty quickly realized this is a passion, right? It's a hunger. It's a fascination, really, with languages. And one or two is just not enough. And every time I pick up a new language, I realize just how interesting they really are. Brendan says, I already have a lot of school background for Spanish, so can read pretty well. Listening and speaking is rougher. Yeah, that's what I found as well with Spanish. Because they teach you all of the grammar. They teach you how to conjugate verbs very well. That's the kind of stuff they quiz you on. They test you on that stuff, right? It's a lot harder to test students on their ability to maintain a conversation. Okay. You can test them on whether or not they're technically precise in their language. But technical precision is really not what we're aiming for when most of us want to learn a language. Of course, we want to speak correctly, but the main goal of learning to speak a language is just being able to communicate with people. And that is not what schools teach you. So before I go any further, I just want to mention really quickly that, oops, let me share my screen with you. Oops, didn't want, sorry for stopping my camera there. I'm starting a new campaign to start promoting my Patreon again. So if you're interested in joining our community, we're trying to grow a small community of dedicated language learners here on Patreon. So if you're interested in that, I have a whole bunch of different tiers here that you can sign up for with different levels of, if you want private lessons from me in one of the languages that I speak, or if you're just interested in more general like language coaching. I help a lot of people come up with a plan for the languages that they want to learn. So if you're interested in that, you want to be part of our growing community, check out my Patreon. That's patreon.com/finkdem, and you can find that in the description of this live stream. Anyways, Adriana says, I've been enjoying learning Latin lately. The book Lingua Latina per se illustrata is super useful and intuitive to start with. It's a graded reader, so you can start basically from zero. That's really interesting. Actually, it's an illustrated graded reader. My Latin is very bad, so I may be misreading that. But yeah, I'd be interested in hearing more about this book. And also, why Latin? Out of curiosity, not out of. I hope I never come off as sounding judgmental when I say that. But I am always interested in why people choose certain languages. I know very well what it's like. Why would you learn Esperanto? Well, I learn Esperanto because it's fun. I love it. It's fascinating. I've made a lot of friends through Esperanto, and I've had a lot of really good experiences with the Esperanto community. Okay, so I'm very familiar with that question. Whenever I ask someone, why are you learning a language? It's never because I think they're weird for wanting to learn it. It's just because I'm curious. Everyone has different reasons for learning. Anyways, point of this video, what language are you going to learn next? Do you ever plan on learning another language? I think a lot of people who follow my channel are learning one language. Okay, if you have some reason for learning Spanish, or maybe you married a speaker of Cantonese whose family only speaks Cantonese, right? And then you want to learn Cantonese for family reasons. Maybe you are fascinated with, I don't know, with Italian culture, and so you want to learn Italian. Or you went on a trip to Haiti and you loved it, so now you want to learn Haitian Creole, right? If you only ever have one language that you want to learn, cool, go for it. If you're just going to focus on one language, you can go really far in that language if you use the right methods and right strategies for learning. Okay? And you don't need to be in school. You don't need to take classes to learn a language really well. In fact, the best language learning takes place outside of class. Learn Arabic with Maria says, what about Arabic? I don't have any goals in the near future to learn Arabic. Of course, that is one of the major languages in the world. So I wouldn't rule out the learning of Arabic if, hopefully I live a long life and learn a lot of languages. But, I have no plans on learning that. Game Nail said, I would really love to learn Japanese, but it's really hard. I've already started learning hiragana and katakana, but dread the thought of learning kanji. I've heard that's very difficult. I sometimes feel like perfecting the language I'm already learning might be a better way to spend time and energy. Yeah, and I'm going to leave this up for a second. That is a very valid concern. Okay. I say this all the time, but you might not have any reason to learn any language, like not even one, other than your native language, right? So it's certainly not the case that you need to learn more than 2 languages, okay? For most people. And maybe you have a job or something where learning more than 2 languages would be very beneficial. But if you have been learning a language for a while and you're thinking about moving on to another language, you really need to ask yourself, first of all, why? And second of all, is it worth it? Okay. Game Nail brings up a very valid point. Okay. If you start working on a third language, right? Like you have your native language and then your second language, and then your second language, first language, second language, third language, I guess would be an easier way of saying that. If you're trying to learn 2 languages at once, you will not learn either of those languages as quickly as you could. So if your main goal is to get really good in Japanese, it might be tempting to start learning another language, and that's fine if that's what you decide is best. If you really ask yourself, what should I do? And you think, well, I just really would be so fulfilled by having a third language, then by all means go for it. But be really honest with yourself. Why do you need a third language? And is it worth sacrificing all of that time that could be spent really moving strongly forward in the other language that you're learning? Okay, this is not an easy question to answer, and there is by no means a single answer. Most of you guys know the answer to that question for me is that I want to learn many languages. I want to learn multiple languages. I'm not content with just English and Spanish, or English and Spanish and Esperanto, or English and Spanish and French. Okay, I'm learning Thai now, and I'm loving it. Eventually, I will move on to other languages as well. And I accept that, that every moment I spend learning Thai is one less moment that I have to practice Spanish, French, Esperanto. My Spanish, I feel like I'm at a level now where I certainly don't speak Spanish perfectly, but I don't feel like I have been losing my Spanish at an alarming rate. I probably don't speak Spanish as well as I did 5 years ago, but I can still very comfortably hold a full conversation. A few weeks ago, I did a live stream here on YouTube where I just chatted with just a bunch of random Spanish speakers. I literally left out my email address and I said, if you want to join my live stream, just email me and I'll have you on my show, have you on my channel. And so I just, for like an hour and a half to almost 2 hours, I think, I just sat here and chatted with Spanish speakers. No problem. I didn't feel uncomfortable with that. This past week, I did an interview with a French speaker on my channel, and that was much harder. And a lot harder than I expected. It's a little bit alarming how much my French has declined in the last year and a half. Okay. If I had done this hour-long live stream entirely in French, if I had done that a year ago, let's say 2 years ago, I would have had no problem because I was minoring in French at college, right? And I was speaking French every day. I was reading French books, listening to French music. French was always on my mind. And I really have basically been ignoring French since I graduated from college. Well, it sort of makes sense. As soon as I graduated from college, I immediately started immersing myself in Thai, purely in Thai. I haven't done a whole lot in French since then. I listen to a French song every once in a while. I started helping my wife learn French, so that kept my French mind going a little bit. I started reading Les Miserables in French, which was a very interesting story. I was reading that on Link, but didn't spend I stopped. I got, I don't know, 10 chapters in, and then I just got busy and I stopped reading. Anyways, I should spend more time practicing French. All that to say that. And that happens, if you are going to learn more than one language, just be aware it's a struggle. It's a struggle to find time to learn more than one language. VIO says, how's your Thai going? ผมเรียนภาษาไทยแต่ว่าเรียนภาษาไทยยากมากแต่ผมจะเรียนทุกวันเพราะว่าผมต้องเรียนภาษาไทยเก่งมาก it's a struggle. My Thai is rough, but I have been improving. I've certainly been improving. Forever Learning French says, Je veux apprendre le créole haïtien après le français. A lot of Haitians moved here to North Carolina after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. Interesting. I didn't know that. And I actually lived in North Carolina at that time. Well, I moved there in 2011, actually. Well, you have a good head start. Learning French is it's going to be a big stepping stone to learning Haitian Creole. Also, many of the Haitians that I know also speak French in addition to Creole and English. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities, between Haitian Creole and French. Okay, I feel that a major barrier for me when I first started learning Mandarin was expecting that there would be a direct translation for everything into English. Haha. Yeah, that's what I thought, right? Like learning a new language just means you learn new words. Wrong. You have to develop a whole new way of thinking about things, right? In if you're going to learn Spanish, you have to get rid of this idea of being a certain number of years old. And you have to develop a mindset of, I have this many years. I have acquired so many years, right? If you're going to learn Thai, you have to get rid of the notion that every verb, you must indicate past, present, or future. And that's hard for me because a lot of times I just want to say, I went to the store, right? And in English, there's no way to say I went to the store without indicating that it's in the past tense. Is there a way of saying that? You could say like, I associate with the action of going to the store. I don't like. There's no way to say that neutrally without indicating tense. I went to the store, right? In Thai, you just have to do that. And it's very strange for an English speaker or for anyone who comes from a language where you always have to indicate when something happened. It's very strange. Yeah, so it's not just a word for word translation. Okay, I'm going to try to read this. ฉันอยากเรียนภาษาไอริชภาษาไอริช Oh, okay, เข้าใจครับ แต่มีผู้พูดไม่มากนักและทุกคนพูดภาษาอังกฤษได้ Yes, so in Ireland, I have to say this in English. I can try it in Thai. ในประเทศไอริชมีคนมากที่พูดภาษาอังกฤษได้ทุกคนพูดภาษาอังกฤษได้แต่ว่ามีคนนิดหน่อยที่พูดภาษาไอริช There's a lot of people and basically everyone in Ireland speaks English. I mean, unless they're like a immigrant or something, right? I understand that there are certain communities in Ireland where Irish is spoken in the home still to this day, but it is quite rare, I believe. But there has been quite a bit of a revitalization effort to get people speaking Irish again. And so I believe there is like a proportionally large number of resources out there for learning English, as opposed to, for example, me learning Thai. 70 million native speakers of Thai, and I can't find any good resources for learning. Well, now that actually I do have a few resources that I have found that I enjoy. Jolchest says, "Saluton, amigos, saluton." Jolchest. By the way, VO says, I can still understand some Thai. That's great, especially since I responded to your first question in Thai. Trevor says, are you from Wisconsin? Because you sound like a Wisconsinite. You're darn tootin', I'm from Wisconsin. No, yeah, I miss Wisconsin. All right. Many people have told me, and perhaps they are only making excuses for not really trying, that as soon as they open their mouth to speak the local language, people jump immediately into English. Yes, that is definitely a fact. I find that no matter where you go, almost no matter where you go, people are eager to jump into English, right? Obviously, sometimes they don't know English. Some people aren't comfortable, but every country I've been to, there's at least someone who doesn't have time for you to practice their native language with them, right? It's just easier to speak English, and so they're a person who jump into English. Not necessarily everywhere, right? Like here in the part of Thailand that I live in, Nonthaburi, Thailand, outside of Bangkok, it's quite common to run into people who don't know any English or very little English, not sufficient English to hold a conversation, right? But there's some, right? And yeah, it's a struggle finding people who will always stay in your target language with you. I found a few channels on YouTube run by Latinists who talk to each other in Latin about lots of different topics. I'm mostly drawn to the sound of it, the possibility of reading old texts. That's really fascinating, the idea of modern people speaking dead languages to each other. Yeah, I always thought that the main appeal of Latin would be the ability to read ancient text, right? You can read Marcus Aurelius, you can read, I don't know, the Latin Vulgate Bible, you can read all kinds of ancient dramas and documents and things like that. Yeah, so that's interesting. Also, the other main appeal was just because Latin has such a strong influence on so many other languages. It's interesting to see all of the root words and how they all relate. And especially myself speaking several Latin languages, or Romance languages, I should say. It would be very interesting for me to see the mother language of them all and see how they've all diverged from that. I was determined to learn Thai this year. I started doing some Japanese and I'm studying every day. I still want to learn Thai anyways. Yeah, so I'm going to give you the same advice I always give everyone. Ask yourself, be very honest with yourself. Be reasonable about what you can achieve, okay? And ask yourself why, okay? Maybe you come to the conclusion that you will be more fulfilled in your life if you are able to speak Thai and Japanese. That's a possibility. Maybe you will, if you think long and hard about it, you will come to the conclusion that learning Japanese to a greater extent is more valuable to you than learning both Thai and Japanese. That's a possibility too. I can't tell you which one is right. Leave that to yourself. What I can tell you is that a lot of people fall into the trap of collecting languages or trying to collect languages, right? I'm going to dabble in Swedish this week. Oh, look, there's some Bulgarian that I can learn. Okay, now I'm going to learn Algonquin. And the whole time I've never given up my dream of eventually learning Mandarin. Well, you can't learn that many languages. You can to some degree. Moses died just a few months ago. He was a legend. He spoke so many languages very poorly. All right, and that's okay because that's what he loved to do. If you watch his videos, it's amazing how many languages he can hold a broken conversation in. And it truly is. I mean, I'm jealous of how many languages he's able to speak a little bit. But recognize that if you watch his videos, he's clearly struggling in almost every conversation he holds. Right? But that's okay. Like, he makes up for that by the fact that he spoke so many, and that's what he wanted to do. That was his goal. He liked going to the mall and being able to converse with any immigrant that he came into contact with, right? Oh, you're from Senegal? Oh, you're from Pakistan? Oh, you're from, Papua New Guinea? I know your language. I can say a few things in your language, right? And that's not wrong. That's a choice. That's a strategy. That's one option. I get the feeling that most of us, not all, most of us wants to develop quite a high level of proficiency in at least one language. And Moses was proficient in several languages. Okay, not saying that he wasn't, but be honest, be reasonable, be realistic with yourself and about your goals. That's all I can say. Don't understand that. Okay, I can write, Rochelle, German has words that literally can't be directly translated into English. Yeah, well, every language probably has words that can't be directly translated into English. I remember when I was, I went to an Esperanto convention, let's call it, and we were playing Esperanto Monopoly. Right, and the word for jail on the Esperanto Monopoly board. Well, it wasn't the direct translation for jail. They called it the what was it called? The crocodileio or something like that, which would literally translate into like crocodile place, the place of the crocodiles, possibly, but a more like. So the jail and Monopoly, they did not mean it in that sense. They did not mean it as in the place of the crocodiles. What they meant it for was the place of people who speak their native language when they should instead be speaking Esperanto. And that's a word in English or in Esperanto, right? Like you just say the word crocodileio and I understand it to mean place where people who speak their native language instead of Esperanto when they should be speaking Esperanto go. Like, and there's no other way for me to translate it. Crocodile place is not a correct translation of the way Esperanto speakers would understand that word. It's just really funny. Elizabeth Hornberger would like to learn Norwegian. Interesting. Why? Why Norwegian? And again, no judgment for people who are learning less commonly learned languages. I think Old Norse in English is cool. There's a lot of influence of Old Norse in English. Yeah. Elizabeth asks, where are you? I am in Nonthaburi, Thailand. Okay, I will learn the language of birds. Interesting concept. You have to go to the Canary Islands for that. That wasn't a joke. I believe the Canary Islands, there's some islands off the coast of Spain where they have a whistle language. Sounds like birds, and then they speak to each other with whistles. It's really interesting. Does anyone know the name of that language? It's called like something silbado, or something. I know someone, there's 20 people watching the stream right now. I know someone watching the stream has to know the name of the whistle language from the Spanish islands. Okay. I'm reading light novels, make good progress. I'm learning Japanese. That's exactly what you should be doing. Reading is an excellent way of acquiring new vocabulary. Okay, sorry. I called Latin a dead language, and Hadriana says an immortal language, not dead. I like that. Okay. Can you talk about how you do your italki lessons? They seem like they are all in the target language. Yeah, so you're probably referring to my lessons with Crew Mom, my Thai lessons. Okay. Yeah, that's not through italki, by the way, but it doesn't really matter. That's exactly, it's the same thing. Yeah, when I do italki lessons, well, I started using italki the first week that I was learning Thai. Actually, the second week, I believe. And I started learning Thai very hardcore. I was studying for 5 hours a day. And the first month or so of italki lessons, I had a tutor who would just say, all right, open your book to page 50 and let's learn some Thai vocabulary, right? And that was okay. Anyone who's been watching this channel for a while, though, knows that that is not how I like to learn languages. Okay, textbooks are fine if you're going to skim. You know, it doesn't hurt to learn some grammar, to memorize a few rules here and there, if you're interested in that. But that is not one of the pillars of language learning. Okay, my pillars of language learning are comprehensible input, conversation practice, and vocabulary acquisition. Okay, comprehensible input I get from watching Netflix, from watching comprehensible Thai on YouTube, from reading books that are at my level. Conversation practice is the entire reason that I want to use italki. If I'm paying someone on italki to help me learn Thai, it's because I want to practice speaking with them. So yeah, Chris, when you say it seems like my lessons are all in the target language, that's exactly right. Let's say 99% in the target language. On occasion, I'll throw in an English word if I don't, and I'll say, hey, how do you say this in Thai? Okay, then they give me the Thai word. All right, okay, fine. I learned that word, back to Thai again. And the reason is because I want to get comfortable communicating in only Thai. Okay. And it's not comfortable to do that. It's hard. My Thai is rough. I speak broken Thai. You can get more comfortable with that, though, the more you do it. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I do italki lessons. Okay? It's because I'm trying to interact with another human being in Thai, just like I would be in the real world when I need to use my Thai. Okay. I don't want to wait till I'm at the store and I need to negotiate, or I need to, there's some problem that I need to figure out and I need my Thai. Okay, I'm not going to wait until that moment to start speaking Thai to someone. I want to start speaking Thai right away. I want to start making all these mistakes. I want to start getting comfortable flubbing around in Thai horribly. I want to start getting used to that right here from the comfort of my own home, where it's not humiliating. Okay? I want to start doing that with someone who is going to be patient with me, who knows I'm learning Thai, and who is willing to stop and be patient and take me through the process. It's a lot easier to do that with a Thai teacher from the comfort of this room, as opposed to when I'm trying to argue with the taxi cab driver that he's overcharging me. That happened to me one time. I was coming home from the airport. It's quite a long distance from the airport to where I live. The taxi driver didn't turn on the meter, which he's required to do by law. And then when we got here, he just said, all right, you owe me this much. And I've taken the taxi from the airport to here many times, and I've never been charged that much. And you didn't turn on the meter, which you're required to do by law. And I told you that I mentioned that because it's a common thing. Drivers see a white person who doesn't know any better. They say, "Oh, I'm not going to turn on the meter." Okay, so every time I get into a taxi, I say meter, cop. Right? That's one of the things you learn when you come to Thailand. You always have to tell the taxi driver to use the meter, and I did, and he didn't use it, and I started getting into this argument with the taxi driver, who was trying to scam me. That's not an argument. I'm saying I don't want the first time I practice using my Thai to be in that situation. It's stressful. It's embarrassing, and it could potentially cost me money. Well, I guess Thai lessons cost money too, but that's money that I'm willing to spend. So, anyways, that's all of that. Some people will tell you, don't start learning to speak right away. Start getting lots of input and vocabulary acquisition and stuff like that. I'm not a huge fan of that approach. I am a huge fan of comprehensible input. Don't get me wrong. I don't like when people say, just read and listen, just do input with no speaking practice. It's okay for some people. Some people do that very well. Steve Kaufman always talks about how that's what he does. I don't like it. I want to start learning to be able to communicate early on, because that's what I'm learning the language for in the first place. What are some potential future careers for linguistics majors? Well, you pretty much have to go into a specialty, right? There's no job description that's just linguist. Well, I don't know. There probably is, but let me tell you this. When I was in the military, there's a job description that is linguist, and what that means is someone who can speak another language. And that is not the technical definition of the word linguist, although linguists are descriptivists, so it's complicated. Anyways, I believe what you mean by linguist is someone who studies linguistics or someone who studies human language as a science, as opposed to studying a language to learn how to speak that language. Well, I went into teaching, okay, and my linguistics background definitely gave me a big help in that area. Okay, I think studying linguistics is very helpful for learning how to learn languages. They're not directly connected, but I find linguistics to be very useful in learning languages. All right. But if you're just going to study linguistics, it's almost certainly not going to be enough to get a job. Okay. Most people who get a job doing something in linguistics, you have to have a master's degree in something more specific, right? Phonology, syntax, sociolinguistics, second language acquisition, psycholinguistics, something, and there's lots of jobs out there because everything that we do involves language. But you have to choose a specialty, whether you're going to help people with disabilities learn to, you want to be like a speech therapist or something. You want to go into language education. You want to go into machine translation or what is it called? Like text-to-speech software. There's linguists who invent languages for TV series and stuff like that. Of course, very few of those. So don't study linguistics planning on that being your job. There's forensic linguists who, work for law enforcement departments, and then they I don't know too much about it, but I think part of what they do is analyzing people's speech. For example, if you find a letter, maybe a forensic linguist can analyze the language in the letter to try to figure out if the person who wrote it is actually the person who said they wrote it, or if it was actually written by the person in the letter, right? And they've used that as evidence in court cases before. It doesn't seem like it would be permissible evidence in court, but I don't know. I don't know too much about that, so I could be off. But it's a job. Forensic linguistics is a real thing. Okay. Interpreters, sociolinguistics, psycholinguistics, forensic linguistics. There you go. So on and so forth. There's a lot. Yeah. Interpreters, in my understanding, don't normally study linguistics. They study Spanish or Russian or Urdu or whatever. Although, of course, an understanding of linguistics, a lot of different linguistics principles would be essential. Although there's also a difference between interpreters and translators. I think probably a translation being like the translation of texts. I am also learning Thai. I'm trying AUR. That's something that I just heard about recently from John. I've been in relatively constant contact with John from Comprehensible Thai, and he recommended that to me recently. It's very interesting, and I think it's something that I might want to try as well. Sawadee Kap Krusuli. Thanks for joining. Krusuli is one of my teachers who is on Comprehensible Thai as well as on italki. Okay. I always felt that for my first 2 years when I was learning Greek, sorry, I don't recall what it was that we were talking about when you said this. I was always frustrated because I had nobody to speak with, but then I made that choice to do daily lessons, which paid off. Yeah, that's absolutely the way to go. I definitely became confident by having daily conversations and even reading literature with daily phrases and such. But this is my approach, so all of us are different. Yeah, and you're right. Everyone has a different approach. Everyone also has different needs because their goals are different, right? If you're learning a language from home, in your home country, let's say you're going to move to France in a year, and you have a year in your home country to learn French. Well, okay, a silent period during that time might be fine. It's not a pressing need that you have to learn French. You have to learn to speak right away. So you can dedicate more time to comprehensible input. You'll learn a lot of vocabulary that way. I'm telling you though, I would still start speaking as soon as possible. Not to the exclusion of comprehensible input, but in addition, in complement with the comprehensible input. And again, there's many successful language learners who do very successfully learn language with a long silent period. I just don't see the point in saying to not speak. So that's up to you. That's a personal decision. I recommend speaking though. It's not in my model, my theory of language learning, to delay speaking. I say start speaking as soon as possible. But also I don't go as far as Benny Lewis, who, his whole philosophy is about start speaking right away. Okay. at least the main center of his philosophy. It seems like, I'm sure he absolutely would not discourage you from using comprehensible input, or say memorize or something like that. But spaced repetition apps. But I kind of put them on equal footing. Speaking practice, do lots of get comfortable making lots of mistakes, flubbing around horribly in the language when you don't know what's going on. Get comfortable saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Could you repeat?" It's tough, and that takes some training. It's like some meta learning going on, right? You're learning a language, but you also have to learn how to get comfortable not speaking correctly. Okay, it's a lot more than just learning verbs and nouns and grammar. You have to learn an attitude. You have to learn a mindset, and that only comes through exposure. You can't study how to have that attitude. You can study it, I suppose, but you won't acquire that attitude that way. NLP is the general name for machine learning side, the machine learning side, but I don't know how many of them are also linguists. Yeah, so, right. When I started looking for jobs in, I was interested in maybe finding some job with like a language learning app or something like that. And so I was like kind of browsing all of the different job positions that at different apps. They're all like computer programmers, information science specialists, web developers, graphic designers, stuff like that. There's no job position at most of these apps for just linguist. Although, well, at some point, people who develop these translation apps and speech recognition apps and stuff, they have to be getting their information from somewhere, right? It wasn't, it wasn't the app, the coder, the computer engineer or whatever that came that did all the research on which the sound wave, the formants of your sound wave corresponds to which vowel, right? There was definitely a linguist somewhere along the line who did that work, and then the computer programmers used that information from the linguist to create their app. VO says, do you use any app for Thai? Right now, yes, actually, yes. Right now I'm using Anki to learn vocabulary, but to a very limited extent. I use Anki for 15 minutes a day tops. I try to spend a lot of time reading. I spend time watching Netflix. I spend time watching Comprehensible Thai on YouTube. And again, I mentioned this in almost every video. I can't mention it enough. Comprehensible Thai is the kind of channel that you should be watching if you are a language learner. If you are, I'm sorry, a beginner in Thai, not a language learner. If you're a beginner in Thai. Let me just really quick share my screen with you and take you through that a little bit. By the way, for those who missed it, I am trying to revamp my Patreon. So if you're interested in joining our community of language learners, you can join our Discord channel. Depends which tier you want to choose. You can get some personal language coaching from me, $6 a month, if that's interested to you. I am limiting it right now because I don't want to get overwhelmed with people. So, but if you want to join our growing community, or if you want, private language lessons in one of the languages that I speak, that's also available. And I would love to get to know you and help you develop Comprehensible Thai. Okay, anyways, what I want to show you is Comprehensible Thai. A brand new channel, just started at the very end of last year, like November, December of last year. Growing quickly. All right, this is a great channel. Videos about basic stuff, bananas, going to the bank, bathrooms, toilets, right? Maybe it's discussing. These are words you need to know. Types of fruits. And it's all in Thai. And it's, for the most part, easy Thai. He has a baby steps series earlier. All right, he's going to take you through a bunch of different nouns. Boy, pants, bird, different birds. Girl, right? This is a girl. Right? This is a bird. And you get lots of repetitions. It's not just boy, girl, bird, train, plane, bus, country, elephant, salt, right? You get lots of repetitions. This is a boy. This is a bird. This is a girl. This is a fish, right? This is two children. This is a bird. This is a fish. This is a mother, a daughter, mother, a daughter. This is a child. This is a cat. This is a bird, right? It's very repetitive. It's very easy. And it's perfect for beginners if you're learning Thai. That's comprehensible Thai. Also, if you can find a comparable video or a YouTube channel in whatever language you're learning, that's gold. Would a Bachelor of Languages in Linguistics be useful for being a bilingual teacher as well? It was for me. Generally speaking, if you want to go into being a teacher, then your major should be in education. I got hired as a teacher at a private school here in Thailand with a degree in linguistics. Okay, but I was teaching English, so it kind of made sense. I also had a certificate. It was almost like a minor in teaching English as a foreign language. So I had pedagogy classes too. If you were to double major in linguistics and in education, linguistics and education, that would be a very powerful combination. Okay, that would probably look very good to a if you were trying to apply to it for a teaching job for teaching languages. Mateus says, "Hey, greetings from Brazil. I really appreciate your work." Thanks, man. I appreciate you. All right. If you could go back in time and start learning Thai again, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? That's a great question. I would have started learning to read and write Thai. Well, to read Thai earlier. I actually did start learning to read Thai. I knew that I had a goal of learning Thai very well. Okay, if your goal is just to reach B1 level in a language, you might not need to learn how to read and write in that language. I wish I would have spent a little bit more time up front. And I always talk bad about book learning, right? Throw out your textbook. Well, I don't say throw your textbook out. I don't think I've ever said that. But obviously book learning is not the best way to go about learning a language. But for learning a new alphabet, new writing system that is foreign to you, I probably should have spent more time focusing on that early on. I wish I would have done 2 conversation lessons a week rather than 1. And done a little bit better of a job focusing on certain topics, right? I could have been a little bit more strategic about planning my my speaking lessons rather than just. I ran into this problem early on when I was learning Thai that I would I would do an italki lesson with a tutor, and we would both show up to the lesson, and I said, I just want a conversation practice, right? So then we would try to have a conversation, but I spoke so little Thai that we really couldn't. So what probably would have been better, more beneficial at that point in time is for me to learn vocabulary. I could say to the tutor, all right, give me a list of 15 vocabulary words on a specific topic. Vocabulary words about fishing, vocabulary words about cooking, vocabulary words about my job, vocabulary words about your job. And then we're going to hold a conversation, a half-hour conversation on that topic so that I can get practice using those words and so that I have something to talk about. I probably would have gone further with Thai if I had done that. I also, this is an impossible, okay, so when I started learning Thai, the YouTube channel Comprehensible Thai did not exist, but I wish that it had, and I wish I would have known about that. Because if it had existed and if I had known about it, I definitely would have been using it a lot. And I think I would have learned a lot of vocabulary a lot faster by going through that. I did use Pimsleur every day, and I think that was okay. It wasn't great. It was good. I'll say using Pimsleur every day was good. I did learn a lot of vocabulary through Pimsleur. In fact, I'd say Pimsleur was probably my main driving force for learning vocabulary. I started off trying to learn words with Memrise and Anki, but because I didn't really know the alphabet very well at that point, I just gave up on those. I wish I would have spent more time learning lots of vocabulary. And in order to do that with Memrise or Anki, I should have just sat down, buckled my belt, and just memorized the alphabet, right? Again, memorizing, book learning is not my ideal way of learning a language, but to learn the alphabet and to learn the writing system, the orthography, how to read, I feel like I could have just buckled my belt and just worked at that for 2 weeks, and then I would have been at the level where Memrise and Anki would have been more effective vocabulary acquiring, vocabulary learning apps for me. The main thing I wish I would have done is I just wish Comprehensible Thai would have existed back then. I feel like that would have been a huge help. There's also another app called Ling app, which I find to be okay. Not great. More or less on the same lines of Duolingo. But I've always said that Duolingo is not a bad way to start a language. Okay, Duolingo doesn't have a Thai course. I wish they did. I would have started using Duolingo. There's no Thai course for Duolingo, but there is a Ling course for Duolingo, and I find Ling to be more or less comparable to that. So that's something that I maybe would have tried if I had known about it back then. Okay. Kester says, I agree, speak from the jump, but it is important to complement it with additional data. Personally, for me, using comprehensible input learning Spanish at first, I think I damaged my ear. Interesting. I got to plug in my laptop here. Yeah, I say speak from day one. I'm with Benny Lewis on that one. I also say lots of comprehensible input. I am with Stephen Krashen and, Matt versus Japan, Steve Kaufman, Jeff Brown, all these people who say lots of comprehensible input. I agree. To me, it's a mixture. But again, most of these people agree, explicit learning of grammar rules, studying of textbooks, rote memorization is not the way to go. We all agree on that. Okay. And we almost agree. Well, here, Emily says, to each their own. If you want to speak at the beginning, great for you. Most people feel comfortable after a silent period. I don't agree with Matt when he says you shouldn't speak for 2 years. Yeah, okay, to each their own, right? We all have different goals, different reasons for learning a language, and different necessities. There are some methods of language learning that are just bad. They don't work for anyone. There are some methods of language learning that are okay, but generally less effective in general. And there are some methods of language learning where it's just to each his own. And, there are effective, this person says, I don't agree with Matt when he says you shouldn't speak for 2 years. Okay. You're right. That is a very extreme stance. I'm not sure if Matt tells you shouldn't speak for 2 years. But his plan it includes a long period of not worrying about speaking, right? And that's fairly extreme. On that note, however, I have often heard it said that Matt versus Japan is the best non-Japanese speaker of Japanese that many people have ever heard. I can't be a judge of that because I don't speak Japanese, but I hear a lot of people say that he sounds just like a Japanese person when he speaks Japanese. Okay, so his system obviously has some merit to it. But yeah, if I move to Japan, there's no way I'm waiting to start speaking Japanese. Okay. Let's say you move to Japan for a year. You're going to wait 2 years before you start speaking Japanese to people? And again, I don't think Matt would actually tell you to not speak. I can't say that for sure. I don't know exactly what his stance is on that. I had a conversation with him once on this channel. We did a live stream together. Our conversation was mostly about comprehensible input, right? So I don't remember if we even touched on speaking or not. Anyone who watched that live stream, you can feel free to chime in, help refresh my memory. If you do remember. I don't think we talked about how long you should wait to speak. We talked a lot about how powerful comprehensible input is. And to that extent, I agree with him completely. 2 years spent with only comprehensible input is not a waste of time. It's not. It's just not what I would do. It was really difficult for me to transition up in my listening. After being frustrated, I ignored listening for a while, then jumped right back in looking at Mexican/Colombian shows on Netflix. Yeah, so I could understand why that would be frustrating. Coupled with the fact that just if I move to a country or if I'm learning Spanish, there's a reason I want to learn Spanish, and it's probably not so that I can watch Telemundo, right? I'm learning Spanish because I want to talk to Spanish-speaking people. So to delay that doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to you. Fair enough. Doesn't make sense to me. And I want to keep saying that there are very successful people who do that. So I want to be very clear that I'm not telling you that they are wrong. Just food for thought, something to think about. Okay. Did you switch back to Anki from Closemaster, or are you using both now? I have made a full transition from Closemaster to Anki. And that's not because Closemaster is bad. I think Closemaster is decent. It's moderately useful, I would say. I gave it I think a 7.5 out of 10. That's, decent rating, right? It's better than I rate most language learning apps. Duolingo, 6 out of 10. 5 out of 10, maybe. Closemaster is fine. There's definite value in it. I just got bored of it, to tell you the truth. It did not hold my attention for the full 2 months that I was trying it out. I like that they use full sentences instead of isolated vocabulary words. That is key. And that's really the main reason I found value in Closemaster. Sorry, guys, I'm just really farty today. Can you hear that? Hopefully you could hear that. Otherwise, that would have been a very strange joke. I don't know why my neighbor does so much drilling, but I hear this sound almost every day. Okay. Anyways, yes, I did switch to Anki from Closemaster. Now what I'm doing, is I am focusing on using SRS. This is an experiment. I've never actually done this. I'm focusing on using SRS to hone my, so loud. I'm using SRS, specifically Anki, to hone my ability to recognize words, not my ability to produce words. Okay, so when I use Anki right now, actually, let me show you this. To tell you the truth, I think I actually forgot to use Anki yesterday. Yesterday was a weird day for me. It's funny. Here's the number of people who were watching the stream. I didn't use it yesterday, and now I'm building up do words. Okay, as soon as this stream's over, I'm going to start doing my Anki today. Skip today. Okay. When I use Anki, I look immediately at something in Thai, not in English. Okay. Grab bong, can, right? Can. I bought a can of Coke. All right. A few things I want you to see here. I'm looking at the words in Thai, not in English. And the reason for that is because I'm trying to hone my ability to recognize Thai words rather than produce them. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to get more into comprehensible input. I'm putting a big focus on that right now. Again, comprehensible input is great. I never want anyone to misunderstand me as being anti-comprehensible input. So I'm honing my ability to recognize words because that's easier. And I can make a lot more progress through Anki if I'm only spending time recognizing words rather than producing them. It's a lot easier to look at this Thai word and then remember, oh yeah, that means can, than it would be to look at the English word and try to remember the Thai translation. Okay. And that could be a potential drawback, right? Because if you're wanting to learn how to speak, then you also need to remember you need to learn how to recall this word without being prompted by seeing it first. Okay, but I'm working on a very specific skill right now. I'm working on my ability to recognize Thai words. And I'm focusing on that skill alone. Not saying that other skills are less valuable. That's just what I'm working on right now. Okay. So that's what you'll see every time I go through an Anki card. By the way, can you guys, oh, you guys can't, you couldn't see my screen, could you? Now I feel dumb. Okay. Sorry. Anyways, here is my screen. I see the Thai word, and then I see the English translation. Oops. Where'd it go there? Okay. So we're going to call this one good because I know that. Here, I see the Thai word first. That's what I see. Okay. First, I try to read the Thai word. Akan. Then I listen to the audio.
Akan.
Akan. Okay. Let's see. Do I remember this word? Akan. I don't remember that word. Building. Okay, I should have remembered that one. All right, and see that's the skill that I'm trying to hone right there. The ability to look at this word in Thai and recognize what it means in English, not the other way around. Just the skill that I'm working on right now. It's also a valuable skill to go the other way, but just that's a different skill. All right, the other thing that's really valuable is the sentence here. Okay, because obviously I don't want to just look at the word akan and then memorize that it means building. Well, what does it mean by building? Building can mean a lot of things. Building could be used in the English sentence. I am building an Anki deck. I am building a wall. I am building an outhouse. I don't. Okay, that's not what the word means in this sentence. I have an example sentence here. Akan kau jam mak jatong tukria ton. Okay, I can read that sentence. See how it fits into the sentence. Many of the older buildings will have to be demolished. All right, that tells me the word akan is not used in the sense of the gerund or the present continuous form of the word build. This is a noun. Many of the older buildings will have to be demolished. Yung. Okay. Busy. I guess there's not really any other way to translate that. I'm busy now. I suppose there's several ways that you could translate busy, right? Like you could say like the streets are very busy right now. The marketplace is very busy, meaning there's a lot of people. Okay. That's not necessarily the translation that the word yung would have. Maybe it could. I actually don't know how to translate that word in Thai. But I see that yung is a way that you can describe a person. I am busy. I don't necessarily know that you could use that to describe a place as being busy. See what I'm saying there? You could also describe like a work of art as being busy, or perhaps like a room. This room is busy. There's lots of like little details and little trinkets in this room. It's busy. Lots of decorations. Okay. I doubt you could use this word yung as that kind of translation. Okay, so that's just a little example of how I use spaced repetition. Yeah. Paul says, Benny Lewis, speak from day one to get your speech working well. Yeah, I am a big fan of Benny Lewis's approach in conjunction with many of the other people who emphasize comprehensible input above speaking. I think they both have value and should be used together, okay? Like you can take, there's some advantages to using Benny Lewis's approach as opposed to a mass immersion approach, right? And there's some advantages to a mass immersion approach to using a speak from day one approach, right? For most people, though, in most situations, I think you will benefit most by using a combination of the two approaches. Although neither one of the two approaches would say to the great extreme, you should only practice speaking or you should only use comprehensible input and never speak, right? So I don't want to mischaracterize their stances. Are your sentences in I+1 order where you only have one unknown word per new item, or are you less strict about that? No, yeah, so I+1, for those who don't know, I represents the input that you can understand. Okay, whatever level you're at right now, you could be watching input where you understand everything. But instead of that, you should watch I+1, which means it's just one level higher than your I, right? One level higher than the input that you can understand. Barely any words that are going to be new or unknown to you. So you can understand almost everything, but then you still get exposed to new information that you are actively learning. No, I'm not very strict about that. In fact, a lot of the sentences on Anki, a lot of the example sentences that I see, they have, maybe half of the words I don't know. But that's fine because when I do an Anki card, I'm not trying to learn every word in the sentence. I'm focusing on one word in the sentence. Okay. When I do comprehensible input, I do try to get a lot closer to I+1, although it's still hard for me to do just based on the limited amount of Thai resources. So when I watch Netflix, that's definitely not I+1. Netflix, like if this is my level in Thai, Netflix is up here, right? Watching comprehensible Thai, the YouTube channel, that is a little bit more I+1-ish. Closer to I+. Well, actually, some of them are I-1, right? Sometimes I'll watch a comprehensible input video on comprehensible Thai, and it's like, all right, I didn't learn anything there. Maybe it wasn't a waste of time because I'm still getting practice listening to Thai, but yeah, ideally what you look for is something where you understand almost everything, but not quite. Although I'm not super strict with that. Right now it's basically just off of necessity because there just aren't resources enough for me to find a sufficient number of I+1 materials. Something that's great nowadays is that everyone on the polyglot community agrees comprehensible input is the best way to learn a language. Hope one day schools accept it. I don't know if everyone agrees that comprehensible input is the best way to learn a language. I would say basically everyone agrees that it is valuable, highly valuable. Right? I tend to put comprehensible input on the same level as conversation practice. It's a little bit tricky though, because if you think about it, conversation practice truly is, there's probably going to be at least 50% comprehensible input, right? If you're speaking to someone and you're able to maintain a conversation, you understand most of what they're saying. And when you understand their message, that is comprehensible input. That's what comprehensible input is. To me, there's still a lot of value in that struggle of trying to communicate with them using a broken version of the language and flubbing through. You got to flub, You have to flub. I think you could probably decrease your flubbing by having a long silent period where you don't speak, but is that worth it? Like, let's say you spend a year without speaking, and then you start speaking after 1 year, and you start to learn how to speak fairly well after 4 months of speaking practice. Let's say, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out there. Is that really preferable to spending the entire year learning how to speak, but after a month of speaking practice, you were able to say something? After 2 months of speaking practice, you were able to say more? After 6 months of speaking practice, you were able to say a decent amount, right? It took you a lot longer to learn how to speak because you didn't already have built up the basis. But you were learning during that whole time, and you were speaking during that whole time, and you could communicate during that whole year, rather than spending a whole year without any ability to communicate and then a shorter period of time. To me, that doesn't, it's not worth it. Let's just put it like that. I guess to some people it's worth it, you know, not to me. Emily says, I don't think Benny Lewis would stick with one language for 4 years. Well, his website is called Fluent in 3 Months, which, you know, basically everyone agrees that the name of his website is misleading. Okay. At least potentially misleading. At the very least, potentially misleading. After 3 months of studying a language, you will not be super proficient, no matter how much you've studied. You can learn quite a bit in 3 months, especially if you're speaking a lot. Okay. You can become conversational and make lots of mistakes, but be okay with that and have a very comfortable level in the language after 3 months. Whether you call that fluent or not, the definition of fluent is a little bit flexible. Right? So would he stick with a language for 4 years? Well, he has reached C2 in several languages. So yeah, he has stuck with languages for more than 4 years. I don't know what you mean there. He maybe not exclusively one language for 4 years, but you know, he's a very successful language learner. Okay. Benny Lewis based the name of his book on the 90-day limit of his travel visa. Right. Yeah. And his whole stance is that anyone should be able to acquire some level of fluency in 3 months. Okay. Andrea says, if Benny and Matt compete in a race to learn the same target language and under the same conditions, who do you think will master the language better in a period of 4 years? I don't know what is going on in my neighbor's house. Okay, this is a good question. After 4 years, Benny, okay. I'm not going to take Benny and Matt as the individuals in this thought experiment because, you know, obviously they're different individuals. So what I will say is, let's take a hypothetical individual, Tony. And Tony can use either Benny Lewis's approach of speak from day one and speak a lot, or Matt's approach of do lots of comprehensible input before you ever start speaking. Okay, they both learn, and he has 4 years to learn a language. Will he have a higher level in that language by following Matt's approach or Benny's approach? And to tell you the truth, I don't think there will be a significant difference after 4 years. I really think no matter whose approach he follows, if Tony is diligent in following one approach or the other, or even if he changes approaches halfway through, after 4 years of intense language study in a language, Tony will speak the language fluently. No doubt in my mind, especially if he lives in that country. The difference is how well will Tony speak the language for the first 3 years, for the first 2 years, for the first 1 year. Okay. If he follows Benny Lewis's approach, he will be able to speak the language after a year. He probably won't be able to read as well after 1 year than he would if he had followed Matt's approach. Okay. After 4 months of following Benny Lewis's approach, he will be able to say some stuff. He will be able to have basic conversations. Not if he follows Matt's approach. Okay. But if he follows Matt's approach, he will probably have a lot more vocabulary than if he had followed Benny's approach. So that's an interesting question. Both approaches can get you where you want to go. And I prefer a mix between the two of them, right? Let's not pretend that you have to choose one or the other. You don't. I have been reading Matt's website recently. Let me share this one with you as well. Again, another little commercial for my Patreon. If you're interested in that, click on the description below. I have a link down there. Okay, refolds.la. This is Matt's website, and I think it's great. I think this is an excellent website. I don't follow it. I don't follow his roadmap, but I have, he has expressed some things very well. Difference between language acquisition and learning, how to use comprehensible input, difference between active immersion, passive listening, active study, right? I really enjoyed reading this website. It was great. He has a lot of really good insights on here. Okay. So does Benny Lewis. And Benny Lewis offers a very different suggestion for how to start learning. And I find a lot of value in both approaches, and I try to take a middle road. So I guess that's all I have to say about that. Brian says, to be fair, they aim for different levels of proficiency. Benny never seems to target native-like proficiency. True. And that's actually what I was saying. To an extent, I think Benny recognizes that a lot of people do want to master their target language. And I think his approach is a great springboard in going into that direction. Matt's approach is more of a long game. whereas Benny emphasizes enjoying the whole process. Well, Matt wants you to enjoy the whole process too. So we have greatly diverged from the original topic of what language are you going to learn next. Here, Ed B says Lakota. That's funny. I put that in the thumbnail of this video because we just watched Dances with Wolves a few nights ago. It's a great movie. It's very long, though. It took us 3 nights to watch it, my wife and I. There's a lot of language learning in that movie, actually. I was thinking about doing a language learning video, like a response to Dances with Wolves. Because it's a video about a guy who is learning to adapt to a new culture, right? He's moving in with the Sioux tribe, the Lakota Sioux tribe, or at least one group, one family of that tribe. And he's learning their language, right? And it shows him learning language, and it shows the others learning English from him. And so it was interesting. There's one scene in the movie where, he falls in love with this Sioux girl, or at least she's been raised by the Sioux, and he's teaching her English. And then she says, "I cannot be married now. I am in." And then she can't think of the word for mourning, right? Like she's in mourning. Her husband died. She can't get remarried. And Kevin Costner teaches her the word for mourning. You're in mourning. You can't, you're not allowed to have a boyfriend while you're in mourning. Well, he says it one time, and then she instantly remembers it, keeps using this word over and over in the conversation. And I'm like, that's not usually how language learning works. Someone teaches me a new word, I instantly forget it. I could try to use it in the next sentence, and I'm going to have to ask them to repeat that word again. This happens to me every week. If you watch my language lessons with Crew Mom, I'm learning Thai. She teaches me a new word. I say the word several times. 2-3 sentences later, I want to try to use the word again, and I can't remember it. So, it's a video that I was thinking about making in regards to language learning. We call it like language learner reacts to Dances with Wolves. How can I make learning vocabulary fun? I have to learn lots of words. I have to improve my English, and I must learn academic words I don't want to study, like in school or boring papers. Any tips? The best way to learn vocabulary is to read a lot. Okay. If you can read for 2 hours a day, that would be excellent. I have this book where there's a quote, and it's a second language acquisition researcher. Has a doctorate in linguistics or second language acquisition or education or something like that. Professor, and he says, people often come to me and say, I have to take the YELTS exam in 6 months. What should I do? And then I say to them, well, how much time do you have to spend learning English every day? And the person will say, well, I have 2 or 3 hours to spend per day learning English. And then he says, that's great. You should spend all 3 hours reading. When you read, you learn new words. Period. Okay. I still learn new words when I read English. Everyone does. If you're learning English, you don't know as many English words as I do. And I still run into new words when I read in English. Okay. If you need to advance your understanding of a certain field, read texts in that field. Hopefully find something that's interesting to you. I understand, you need to learn academic words. well, hopefully you can find some academic field that is interesting to you, right? Or possibly find a novel that is written about an academic. Okay, find, we call that a domain. You want to narrow down the domain that you are trying to improve in. And when I say a domain, let's say you're going to go to college and you need to learn all of the college-y words, right? Dean, I don't know, advisor, a peer review, I don't know, dormitories, right? Again, it's been a few years since I've been out of college now. Final exam, teachers, TA, I don't know, college-y words, university words. I'm sure you guys can think of a whole bunch that I didn't name off right there. And you need to learn these words. Registrar, there's one. The registrar's office. What's the registrar's office, right? So read things about university. Read a novel about a university student who is going through college. I'm sure you can find a novel out there that focuses on the academics of a certain student, and someone has probably found a way to make that interesting. That is narrowed in on the domain of academics. Okay. It's a little different if, you could find a novel about a college student who goes to Cancun on spring break, and that might, that's a different domain, right? But I'm sure you can find something in the domain of learning academic words, right? And if not, find something that's interesting to you. Read a history of the university. Read academic articles. Reading published papers. Yeah. This is an obvious one. Reading published papers related to your likely major might be a good idea. Yeah, so those can be often very heady and go over your head. So hopefully you can develop some proficiency in that domain by doing that. If not, published journal papers and peer-reviewed studies often will be very difficult to understand. But there's also very often books written by those same experts that are designed for a more general audience. So, for example, John McWhorter is a very famous linguist. Okay, Stephen Krashen. Stephen Krashen is a good example. Steven Pinker. Okay, these are Noam Chomsky, right? These are people who are very famous in the field of linguistics. Steven Pinker and John McWhorter and Stephen Krashen, in addition to writing peer-reviewed journal articles that might be very difficult to understand, they have all written books that are designed for non-linguists. Okay, that should be easy to understand, and it will start to introduce you to the vocabulary of the fields that you're interested in. Teach us something cool but random in Thai, homie. Okay, I guess that's all I have to say about the academic language thing. So, okay, fair enough. Something cool but random in Thai. So, Thai is gendered very differently than most other languages that I have studied, right? In English, you have the word he and she, right? Two different genders of the third person pronoun. In Thai, you have two different genders of the first person pronoun. Okay, so you could actually use the same pronoun to refer to that man over there or that woman over there, but the pronoun you use to talk about yourself is dependent on your gender. So I would say pom. In a formal setting, I would say pom. And if you're a girl, you would say chan or di chan. So the pronoun, the genders of the pronouns are very different. Also, the genders of siblings. In English, I would say brother or sister, depending on if it's a male or female sibling. In Thai, you don't do that. In Thai, you say nong or pi, depending on if the sibling is older or younger than you. Okay, in English, the only way you can say that is just by adding the word older or younger. It's a separate word. In Thai, that's encoded in the word itself. P is an older sibling, whether it's a brother or sister. You would have to just add that on as additional information. P chai, P sao, right? Just in the same way as in English, you have to add on older or younger as additional sort of unnecessary information. The necessary information to share is their gender in English. In Thai, the necessary information to share is whether they're an older sibling or a younger sibling. So that's an interesting difference. You also have to end your sentence differently depending on your gender. So I'm a man, I would say sawadee kap. If when I'm saying hello, I have to end my sentence with kap. A girl would end their sentence with sawadee ka. They say ka instead of kap. You know, small, interesting, different ways that they use gender in Thai. How's your Thai coming? Just did 2 hours of AUR comprehensible Thai. That's great. Everyone's been mentioning that, and I'm going to definitely try it out. My Thai has been coming along quite nicely. Thank you. Yeah, Japanese does that too, probably most Asian languages. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for making videos on linguistics. Thank you. I actually should have a new video on linguistics coming out this Monday, a continuation of my current IPA series. Anyways, this stream has been going on for almost 2 hours. I need to go take a leak. So I'll see you guys all next week.